All right, friends, welcome to week 2. For some reason, I kept thinking it was week 3 and I was tripping out. And I was like, what happened? What did I teach in week 2? Where's the lecture videos? But it is not week 3. It is week 2. Turns out. So this is week 2, lecture 1. Happy Valentine's Day. So good for you guys for being here. Here's a heart for you. But yep, happy Valentine's Day. A little bit of housekeeping. There's a couple things that I want to go over. Discussion questions. So there's 2 discussion questions due this Sunday, February 19th, 11:59 p.m. I sent you guys an email this morning talking about that as well. A couple of people did not do discussion questions. And so please, I will be reaching out today and or tomorrow morning for those that are falling behind discussion questions or assignments. If you don't hear from me, then that's a great job. Keep doing what you're doing. And if I do reach out, it is not in an accusatory way. It is more so of, hey, are things wrong on my end? And if so, can you kind of help me understand and see what, sort of where I'm messing up? So I will be reaching out today or tomorrow if you are falling behind. And if you are, it's not a big deal. Just so you know, every other week is we'll have like an unofficial and then an official check-in this first Monday. So that happens on Mondays. This first Monday was an unofficial check-in. So if you are falling behind on assignments, you can catch up this week. Unfortunately for discussion questions, there is no catching up. You can miss up to 5. And if you miss 5, then you have to redo the stack, even if you've completed everything else. So please don't make that be a thing. But if you're falling behind on core assignments, that's okay. Go ahead and just catch up this week. You'll be good to go. We have 3 core assignments. Now, these are some core assignments that build upon each other. This, putting it together, builds upon our prop it up assignment. So just know you're going to have to basically add on to that. And then hook forms is the beginning. And I believe more forms builds off of hook forms. So these are your 3 core assignments that are due on Sunday, 11:59 p.m. I'll be checking them Monday morning. So if you're at a little bit late Monday morning, that's okay. But yeah, those will be due then. Really exciting. Wanted to introduce Gray's office hour is officially starting on Thursday. So every Thursday, Gray is going to be doing a great office hour. This one is going to be on event handling. We're going to talk a little bit about event handling today, or we are going to talk about event handling today. And Gray's just going to go more in depth. I know that they are working on slides and been working really hard on that. So really excited for that. Just wanted to, it's our first week, right? You have office hour is, as always, from 4 to 5 p.m. PST. So yeah, so Gray is just going to take over our office hour and do some teaching. Obviously, if you have a question, you really need some help, you can just message me and I can hop into a breakout room. But it's going to be from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock every Thursday. Gray's going to sort of walk through something. And it's a really cool thing for you guys because not every TA does this. I'm sure you guys have had TAs and know that. And B, this is just a time where we want to give you as much information as possible. Hence why I've been doing like for loops and while loops and stuff like that for this past office hour. If you didn't make it, that's what it was on, was for loops and while loops. We just want to help you guys get as much as you can out of this. So somebody asked if it's the same time as, it's just replacing office hours. So it's the same. But again, if you need, if office hours are really useful for you on Thursday, you can always message me. And while Grace presenting, we can hop in a breakout room if you have some really deep issues. Cool. What I want to do, it's our first week. We're officially done with our first week. You guys are now sort of no longer dipping your toes. Now you have some experience in React. Just want to do a little bit of a health check. Scale of 1 to 10. How are we feeling? How are we feeling about coding? How are we feeling about MERN and React and JavaScript? You guys just put in the chat, how are you feeling on a scale of 1 to 10? Okay, quite a bit of 7s, 8s, 9s. I'd say as long as you're within, really this 6 through 9 range, 10 range, I think you're doing great. Now, if you're anything below a 5, that's not a bad thing by any stretch of the imagination. Please just make sure that you sort of message Gray and I. You just kind of private DM us on Slack and just let us know. That way, again, it's not a bad thing. Maybe, life happens. I fully understand life happens. People get sick or you get sick or whatever. You don't need to explain it to me. But we just want to be there and help you in any single way that you can, or we can. So great. Awesome. Seems like everybody is in around the same boat. And if you guys are, at a little bit lower, maybe see somebody who is out of 10 or an 8 or a 9 and say, hey, help me, because it's going to actually help them as well. So please do that. And we are all in this together. As you guys, if you went to office hour, I was incorrect. I literally was wrong. And because Tyler asked me more and I was like, instead of lying and just making something up, let's actually look at it. And it showed that I was wrong. And what that does is that helps me as a developer, right? And it helps you guys understand. And I am very much so not perfect. You can ask my wife. So that's what we're all in this for together. Cool. Now I had a request to kind of more so, instead of just building this code and talking about things, show what we're going to try to build and then build it from there. So I do already have the complete code on GitHub for what we're going to build. I've already built it. I've done unofficial and, oh yeah, never mind. I've already had that. So this is what we're building today. This is going to be sort of our Cupid's matching stats. I was going to do pizza. And then I was like, oh, today's Valentine's Day, or when our class is on Valentine's Day, I should probably do something different. And so I did Cupid's matching stats, tried to make it fun. But what we're going to do is we're really going to talk about state today and state management. How do we manage data? How do we manipulate data? And how can we keep data sort of persistent and also separate? So what we're going to do really is we're utilizing props to pass in some information. And then a big thing we're going to do today is we're going to be able to do something like this, where I can add a new match. And now this fairy has had 23 matches versus the 19 or 7 or 8. So we're going to be able to take this data, manipulate it, and then show the new manipulated data onto our actual website. Now, this isn't fully what we're going to be doing. It's going to be a very big piece of what we do. We just don't have a database set up yet. Once we have a database, then it's really not just manipulating, because right now, if I refresh, everything's going to go back to normal, right? But once we have a database, then once we click this button, we're going to use and do our event handlers, and we're going to have different things that we can do that is going to allow us to actually manipulate this data and change it. And think about like a Facebook like. If you click the button, the like now happens, right? And it is so that's what we're going to be learning. So for those that asked to visualize what we're building before we actually build it, that's what we're doing. And like I said, this is already on the GitHub, on our class GitHub. You can find that on the class calendar right here. Yep. Cohort GitHub. Again, I thought I was going to do pizza. So if you see lecture 1 and then the actual class, the folder is going to be lecture 1 in class. But you'll see that this React is pizza. Alas, I did not mean to do pizza. I meant to do Cupid. So we'll fix that in class today. But if you're like, why is that React pizza? Well, that's just because I messed up. So any questions on that? Pizza is love. That's a big facts. I love that. Cool. Let me go ahead and end that. Great. We will get started then. Okay. Oh yeah. So if I am typing too fast, the code's already on there. So you guys can, I'm going to be doing basically the same code. So feel free to go and grab that. Okay. And then lastly, like I said, there's an unofficial check-in every other Monday. So this past Monday was our unofficial check-in. So if you are falling behind, this is the week to catch up. If Super Bowl got you and you thought you were going to do your assignment Super Bowl night, and alas, you did not, that's okay. Go ahead and catch up now, except for the discussion questions. Anything before we jump into sort of what we do, and then we're going to build this Cupid's match program together. But anything you guys need from a housekeeping perspective, any questions on this? Okay.
Oh yeah, my daily rant that I always will say, if you guys need help, if anyone's struggling, please reach on out. You guys are my first priority because I am your TA for the cohort. So if you are listening back to this video, maybe a day or two later, just know I'm your TA. And if you need assistance, please call on me. I'm in the Discord as Justina Gray. Well, Dojo Justina Gray, to be honest, to be more specific, but make sure you reach out or my email. But yeah, that's it. Okay.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Gray. Cool. Sorry, I'm just getting my other window all. Yeah, Gray for the win. You guys are lucky, lucky, lucky because Gray's incredible. Okay. So we're going to talk about a few different things. We've talked about our creation of our React. Can anybody tell me? I've already done that. I've already created our React. We've talked about, and I've already asked you what sort of the different way to activate React is npx create React app. Make sure that you CD into that React app. But I have not done much after that. Like if I look at my source, all I've done is deleted what is in this app. I have just sort of done very little, just created this. That way you guys didn't have to see that once again. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a couple different things, and we're going to go actually to the platform for this. Now, I know that you guys can read, so I'm not going to read this thing for you. And obviously you guys are paying for us to make sure that we, sort of teach you. So want to make sure that you guys are really prepared. And obviously just there's a couple different things I want to do here. So here in React, or maybe let's backtrack a little bit. When you had JavaScript, right? Let's go through here. You might have had some sort of, I'm going to put this button, right? And can anybody remember what the event listener was for if I wanted to click on something and create an alert? You guys remember what that was? Yeah, it was on click, right? So if I was doing that, I would say something like on click equals, and then I would say, maybe alert, and I could add some sort of alert. And if I do this alert, I could pass in some sort of information. What is happening here? Sorry. Right? I could equal this, I could pass an alert, and then all of a sudden, once this button was clicked, an alert would come up. Now, an issue with that, and when it comes to React, is that if we were just to run this value here, there's two things that happens. First off, and let's exclude this anonymous function for right now. Let's pretend that we just did an on click and we said alert. What would happen is, can anybody remember what part of React makes, whenever I wanted to console log, made it run twice? Anybody remember what part of that? I'm dealing with React and I was console logging, and it was console logging twice. It was showing everything. Yeah, exactly. It was our strict mode, right? Anybody tell me where the strict mode's located? In these files. Yeah, exactly. It was in our index.js. So remembering that our strict mode actually made it run twice, that was just part of the development issue. A second thing with that is if I were to run this, the way that React works is if it sees just a normal function, it will automatically run it. So if I were to run this, it's going to have an issue because I'm in JSX. If I were to run this and I clicked the button, or before I even got to clicking the button, when the page loaded, it's going to see this function and it's automatically going to run it. It's automatically going to say, okay, I see this function. Let's go ahead and run this. That is sort of a weird thing with React. And so what we can do is we can actually change that by doing a few different things. The first is by creating an anonymous function. By creating this anonymous function, it doesn't automatically run this, and it waits until this event listener, until this actual piece happened, right? Until this button is clicked. And so if I wanted to do that, if I wanted to basically have this to where I want to have a button and I wanted it to alert and said, you clicked a button. Instead of doing it like this, I can say equals, I can do this guy, my anonymous. Now, what is happening? I've got this button issue. I've got this, and then I can say, you clicked the button. Now I have one other issue that is making my code look very hideous. Can anybody see what is the other issue I've got within this code? What's the difference here between what we have and what is right here? Yeah, there's a few things, right? There's the few things of we first need some sort of value. So if we're looking at this, our on click is within curly brackets. So let's go ahead and do that. This entire thing within curly brackets. The second thing is when we're dealing with React here, this is a camel cased on click. Now you might have seen, let's see if there's, I believe it shows some old ones. So here's some on change, on submit, on focus. Oh, this is the, I don't know that you guys see this. I think this is just a instructor's version. But here, this is our old on click, right? Where I say on click equals alert. You click the button, click me, you clicked it. And then all of a sudden you, it would do this alert. But again, if we were to run just this, what would happen is it would automatically run that function of alert, even if we didn't click the button. So what we do is, again, we make that anonymous function by doing the parentheses arrow function. That's really where the power of arrow functions come in with React. But then secondly, even though we have all of these guys right here, all of these different events, when we're dealing with synthetic events, which you can sort of think about them as the sort of the same thing, right? It's just React's way of handling these events, is we use camel case over lowercase. So when I actually have my code here, when I say on click, I have my anonymous function, it's alerts, and then I'm going to say click me. Save this. Let me get my terminal up and running. CD Cupid. Sorry, guys. My terminal was acting weird. There we go. PM start. Sorry about that. It's like, what is happening? Okay. So now you can see when I click this, I get an alert that says you clicked the button. If I were to not have this, I would say something like this. And change this to C. Let's even see if this works. If I come here and I refresh, it doesn't even work. I'm wondering if I'm in JSX and it's not working, because that should be the exact same thing. But regardless, when we're dealing with React, we have anonymous functions to prevent those these functions from automatically running. And then secondly, we have our on click, and our click is a capital C. So again, now if I come here and I refresh this and I click it, now our actual function runs only when we want the function to run. Cool. Let me look in chat. A couple things. So somebody asked, how did I do that? Oh, highlighting. Yeah, that's like a I don't know exactly what extension that is, but you can do a ton of stuff where you can like highlight, and then you can do same thing with like a string, and it'll automatically do a string or the brackets or parentheses. Okay. Any questions on sort of synthetic events and how that operates, how that works, how we take these basic HTML events and then within React, shift them using anonymous functions? The whole point of why we teach you arrow functions, right? Anonymous, and also anonymous means that there's not a name, right? That's just an empty parentheses, meaning it doesn't have a name. So normally in a function call, you have to call the function by its name. But when we have an anonymous, right here, this just automatically runs when we click it. We have a ton of different things. We can have on blur, on submit is something that we're going to really have. On change is something when we are dealing with a form. These are really on submit is going to be a big one. So when we start dealing with forms this week and tomorrow, we'll deal with on submit. So once a form is being submitted, we'll attach that to our button. And then we'll say on submit, here's what we want to do. Here's what we want to do. Another big key and kind of focus of today, obviously, is something called hooks. And hooks are a really important part of React, but really just at a very basic perspective, all a hook is some sort of function. It's a built-in function. It's a thing that we can do to utilize React and to manipulate something. And a hook that we're really going to use is going to be something called useState. So similar to whenever I showed the React app and it showed how many matches that had, right? What I did is I put, and we'll talk about useState here in a second, is I told React, okay, I want you to remember this value that starts at, it was at 19. I want you to remember this value of matches, right? How many matches this fairy had. Then what I want you to do is I want to be able to manipulate it. I want to be able to grab that value and I want to be able to change that value. That is what we call a hook, because at the end of it, and what we'll see here is useState, which is the only thing we're focusing on today, is just a function. It's just a function built in with React that allows us to maintain what is state. And here is great. It says state refers to data that is specific to a rendered component and is stored in memory. So if I want to temporarily remember this value, then I can go ahead and do that. So this idea behind state is this temporary holding place of some information for a component. If you guys dealt with like Python, you might have dealt with session. I think Java, you guys do session as well. So it's just this temporary value that you want to keep intact. It's not anything like if you wanted somebody to log in and have that being persistent throughout your website, you're not necessarily going to utilize state for that. But if you just want to keep track of, in our case, we're just increasing how many matches they had, useState is going to be a great tool, a great kind of functionality, a great function. At the end of the day, that's all it is a function for us to set some information, say, okay, this is what it starts at. And then based off of some functionality, if they click it, then we update that functionality, which brings us to useState. Now, you guys can read this, but useState is going to be something that we are continuously using. There's a few things we have to do for it, and I just want to show it, and then we're actually going to go in the code. Now, today's a little bit more theory-based. In order for us to use state, we have to bring in useState. That's just something, and it does have to have the curly brackets around it. All right, we're saying, okay, from React, let's go ahead and use this hook of useState. And then we will declare, and we're going to, when we build this out, we'll actually see what this looks like. So we're going to declare this. And then we declare what useState is. So let's actually, I think this is, you guys can read this, but it'll make more sense if we just jump in and do it. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay. So I want to create Cupid's like matches, right? We want to make sure that we have the stats for Cupid, but it's been a busy year. So Cupid's got to outsource some of the matching, right? Cupid can't do it themselves, so they're going to outsource. So we're going to have multiple fairies that do matches for Cupid, in the same of Cupid, right? Cupid gets all the credit, but we have multiple fairies that are going to handle that and do that for them. So let's do a couple things. Let's create an H1 that's going to say, I like emojis, so I'm sorry if you don't. I think it's frequently used one, that little baby. Pretty funny. Nope. Okay. So let's do Cupids. Matching stats. Cool. Now, what I need is I need a component that's going to show the information from my fairy. What's my next step here? Here, all I've done is create a React app. What is my next step for I want to have a fairy component? What would I do? Okay, component folder, Alan. Yeah. Yeah, where would I create this components folder? Yeah, in your SRC, right? So here, I'm going to create my components folder. Cool. And then within my components folder, I'm going to create my first component. So I'm going to say fairy.jsx. Cool. Now I'm going to say RAFCE, find out what it means to me. Great. And if you guys are dealing with the RAFCE, we found this out in, I think it was office hour. If it is not working, just put a dash in front of it. I don't know why. Gray is the one who found that fix, but right now React is doing some updates. We don't know if maybe what's happening is based on the node you have, or the React, basically the node that you have. If the extension's off, I have no idea what's happening. But if RAFCE is not showing up for you, just put a dash, but make sure it's going to have a dash here once you do it. So go ahead and delete that, or else it might act weird for you. But here I've got my fairy. And I want them to have a few things, right? So within my div, I'm going to have an H2 that's going to say fairy name. I'm going to have another H2 that's going to say fairy. Shoot, what did I say? Fairy color. Kind of hard to think of fairy stuff, if I was honest. I'm going to have fairy bow type. That's fun. And then I'm going to have fairy matches. Cool. These are the things that we're going to have, and we're going to pass through. Now, if I wanted to pass through some data to this fairy, remembering data flows how? Does it flow upwards or downwards? Flows down. Great. What is the hierarchy here? If I have two squares and I'm thinking, what is the parent of fairy? App.js. Yeah, great job, guys. I'm trying to build with you guys. So hopefully if this is not fun for you, please let me know, and then we can do it. I can just build it out faster. But okay, so from app.js, I know that I need to pass in some data to my fairy JSX. So if that's the case, what are the things that I need to do? Well, what is my next step? So I need to import the component. Yeah, that's a big piece of it. I'm going to cheat because I know that if I type fairy, if I say fairy, then it's going to import. But yes, I need to import from this location, components, and then in my component is my fairy. Somebody asked, is it necessary to create files and components as JSX, or is JS okay? JS is just fine. We'll both do the same. JSX allows you to do HTML snippets, and so that's why I like it. It's basically like I'm building an HTML, versus JS sometimes can be finicky. So there's that. Okay, so I have my fairy component that I built in. Now, I said that there was a few. I'm going to pull this to the side here. I said there's a few different things, right? I want it to have a name, a color, a bow type, and fairy matches. What do I have to do here? If I want two, I'm going to have two fairies. What's my next step? How do I get this information from here to here? If I wanted a name, somebody give me a name and maybe write in the code how this would happen. Yeah, I'm going to create key value pairs. I mean, that's a great way. So I'm going to say fairy name equals. And then what do I have to do next? Yeah, great job, Kat. I'm going to do this. I'm going to say curly bracket because I'm passing in some data. I give it my key. Well, I already have my key as name. It's fairy name. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say something like grid. And then finish that. Cool. Now I also need fairy color. AIRY equals, I'm going to say blue. I'm going to say fairy bow type. Fairy bow type is going to equal, what's a good bow type? Anybody know? I don't know anything about bows. No crossbows. Let's say crossbow. Sounds fun. Crossbow. And then lastly, I need fairy matches. That's going to be equal to, let's say 20. This Greg dude crushes it. Cool. Great. Just a little bit easier for you. Cool. Now, compound bow. Okay, we'll do that. So now we need to do another one, right? But instead, I want this person to be named, let's say, gray. Favorite color, gray. Nailed it. Compound bow.
No, purple, purple.
Oh, purple. My bad. I suck. Great. Funny. Purple.
I'm kidding.
Purple. Speaking of purple, did you guys see they're redoing Barney? That's pretty tough. Okay, and then Gray, how many matches you think you would crush if you were a fairy all year?
Is it from 1 to what?
I don't know, whatever you
20?
think. Believe in
All
yourself.
right. All right. 7 is always a great number. So I'm gonna just say 7.
7, that's tough. Okay, but I love it. Cool. So then lastly, we'll do one more and we will say something like cat. Cat's been very active. Cat, what's your favorite color? Cat got 100 cuts, outdoing both you and Greg. Blue. That's tough. Okay, I'll do them green. Green. We have blue. And we have recurve. Is that what I heard somebody say? Recurve. Yep, you got a recurve. I hope that one's dang. Okay, so I have this information. I'm calling my component. I am passing this information. What does my component need in order to receive this information? Stereo, yeah, you're on the right match, but first, what am I missing in here to actually receive the information? I'm giving the information here. That's awesome. That's great. But something in here is being missed. Not an import. Yeah, exactly. Great job, Kelsey. It's props. Remember, my function, I can pass in information, right, from here. But this part of the function says I am receiving something. So if I don't have props, I have nothing, though I'm giving values, it's not going to receive it, right? My function must have props in order to receive the values that I'm getting. Cool. Now, just like I think it was a stereo said, we can go in and show some information. So here I could say props dot, and then I have a couple things. Now I can use my key name. So I can say fairy name. Perfect. Here I can say props dot fairy fairy color. I can say props dot fairy bow type, fairy bow type. And then lastly, I could say something like props dot fairy matches. Perfect. So now I'm receiving this information. Remember, props is just an object. Props is just an object. So I'm receiving this information. I'm taking in these values, right? And I'm just basically giving the key name. Somebody asked, are props universal, meaning that they can be passed in any component if we wanted to access the fairy info on that page? No, great question. And maybe I'm misunderstanding. Because I'm calling the component here, this information that I'm adding into my component call is what is being understood here. If I was calling in, let's say I had, a dog component. Well, it doesn't have access to these props unless the fairy component also called it, right? Because all of this information is only attached to my actual component call right here. Cool. So I'm going to say button. Let's not do that. Yeah, cool. So now if I were to run this, let's go. Let me get my server up and running. I think it's already running. Ah, where is it? It's not it. Okay. Now you can see that I've got this information. I've got Fairy, Greg. I'm going to do something real quick. I'm going to add, and this is bad CSS, but that's okay. I'm just going to add in HR. Just going to add in a line so I can actually see it. Okay. So now I've got my fairy name, which is Greg, green, crossbow, fairy matches. And we can see that it's all different, right? I'm able to pass in information. And because I was able to utilize props, I was able to show that information on the front end. If I were to change anything on this left side, obviously it would change on my actual site itself. Any questions on what we just did? It's sort of more of that is all a refresher of what we've already gone to, but any quick questions before I go into useState and us actually applying useState? Let me go through also the chat and see. Jonathan had a great point. I could, because now I have more and more. I could absolutely destructure this. Instead of having to say props.fairy name, I could just say name, color, bow type, matches. How would I do that? Does anybody know how I destructure this? I think it's a pretty good idea instead of having to say props. Tyler asked, could I put an HR? Yeah, I totally could. So I could say X and then come here. That's probably pretty smart, Tyler. Then it will look the exact same. Yep, I could do that. Cool. So just like Jonathan said, if we wanted to destructure this, right, I didn't want to have to write props every time. I could say something like const. I'm just taking this from what he had. Because this is an object, I am I'm doing a curly bracket, and I'm just going to say name. I'm going to say color, bow type, matches. And this is, now I could just, I don't know, I don't need props.fairy. I can just say props. So here I've got name, color, bow type, matches. So now instead of this, I just have to put name. Instead of this, I just have to put color. So this, I can just put bow type, TYPE. And instead of this, I can put matches. Also, I'm very sorry if you guys can hear my dog snoring wildly behind me. Okay.
I don't hear it.
Okay, good. It is rough. And we can see that this is the same. Oh, Let's see what happened. Oh. So my server crashed. So let's see. Elements must be wrapped. What did I do incorrectly here? Anybody see my error?
There's no semicolon at the end of props.
Here. Still give me an error.
Oh yeah, you
Where's
also
your
removed your
return?
return.
Yeah, your return function before, after line 5, return.
Oh yeah, what the heck happened? What did I do there? Oh, fascinating. Okay. I see why this destructuring would not work. So it's not showing up anything.
Well, it doesn't have to be exactly the same, like fairy name.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
That's why I thought it was.
All the fairies.
I know.
And you just have fiery.
I know. I'm a terrible speller.
Noise.
Fairy. And then I say yes. Fairy name. Fairy matches. Okay. So I made a rookie mistake, remembering that these must be exactly the same as this right here. So because I just had name, it was not showing any data because it was saying, okay, well, I have name, but I don't know what name is. I don't have a key of name. So that was a rookie mistake. Now it is showing up. So yes, this is much easier than just saying props dot fairy name, props dot everything. So it reduces that. Cool. Great. We added the HR after. So look at you guys, we're crushing it. You guys are crushing it more so. Okay, so now we want to add in this idea of state, right? Because let's say that I wanted to be able to have a button here that was called add matches. Let's say that we are live streaming and, people are being matched. They're calling in and saying, oh, Justina or Gray matched me, or Kat or Greg. So I want to be able to add matches here. Now, this will not be able to work, right? This button has no ability to update any sort of this target right here, right? And so that's where this idea of useState, we want to take the current state that it's in, and we want to be able to manipulate it. So remembering that if I'm going to use useState, I have to bring it in up here, useState. Cool. So I'm bringing in useState. Now, what I'm going to do, if I want to, I'm going to get rid of this right now. If I want to use state, I'm going to come in and I'm going to say const. And now this is how we set it up. We're going to say matches, set matches. And I'm going to walk through this here in just a second. This is what we call our getter. I'm going to call this our getter. And this is going to be our setter. Our getter is us retrieving this data and retrieving the current value, right? This set matches is actually a function that allows us to set a new value for whatever our current value is. So what we're doing is we're using this hook within React. And this useState, just like I said, hooks are just functions, right? And this function takes in a starting value similar to if you were in the for loop, while loop office hour. Similar to how you have to sort of set your index. This is setting state at a value. The current value, I could put 0 right here, and that would start everything at 0. So even fairy matches wouldn't matter. But I want to start at whatever the fairy had already started at, 7 or 100 or 20. And so when I want to call this information and I want to get it, this will be set to whatever it starts at. So if I'm looking at this, Greg starts at 20. So when I am dealing with this fairy for Greg, it's going to be set at 20. Then what I can do is I can manipulate this value of 20, and I can set it to a new value. And so let's say with each click, I just want it to be 1. And so we can change that, right? And change the value that is associated to Greg. I'll show you what I mean here. So here we are creating our useState, right? We are creating our state. We have established, and they always are getters and setters. And usually what you will do, this can be anything. It could be unicorn if you wanted. But syntactically, it is the best practice is to whatever you have on the left, the right is basically the same thing with set in front of it and then camel case. So here's matches. We want to set matches. Just to distinguish, because if you don't put set in there, it can get kind of confusing if you're dealing with, and we'll see how this is a function here in a second, it can get kind of confusing when you're dealing with that. So you always want to say whatever your initial sort of getter for your state is, you want to say set matches in this case. We're running the useState function and we're setting its initial value to whatever is being passed through for fairy matches. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Is there anything that's not super clear? Anything that's a little bit confusing that I can go over before we actually go in the process of doing this? Can you just put a 1 in the chat if this makes sense? Put 0 if it does not. Cool. Okay. So we have our state set up, but we're not doing anything with it, right? So what I want to do is let's do this button. We have this button, and this is the tool that we are wanting to basically utilize to increase the amount of matches, right? So right now, if I were to see this, I just have this button. I can click it. It doesn't do anything. So what I can do is now going back to our event listener, I can do something like on click. And what do I want to do when I do on click? I want to have a function. Now I could build the function within this just like we saw. I have it right here. And that's fine. Where I could have sort of anonymous function and it does something. But one thing to note is we can actually take our code and add in function. It's not a bad idea to separate out our code, because if we have, especially if you have like a little bit larger of a function, it might get very confusing. If it's something very basic, like an alert, that's okay. Throw it in line, meaning just throw it in right there. But here, what we're wanting to do is we're wanting to grab this information, run this function, reset the information, right? So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to create a new function here called add matches, because GitHub Copilot just automatically knows me. And this is going to be an anonymous function, because remember, if it's not, then it's automatically going to run. And what this is going to do is it's going to run our set matches function. It's going to take in the getter value, so whatever it's starting at or whatever its current value is. And then all we're doing is adding 1. So we have this function. I'm just going to walk through this again. We have this function called add matches. It's an anonymous function, anonymous arrow function. We're using our setter function to grab the initial information and just add 1. When this function is done running, its value becomes this guy right here. Once it's done running, it is setting the new value for matches. It is setting matches. So now all I have to do is come here and say add matches. And then the last thing I have to do is right now we are currently having our fairy matches show up to whatever we deconstructed here. Now, if I keep it this way, it's always going to stay the same, right? Because though we are manipulating our state, this initial value is there. So if I wanted it to keep up, what do you think I would set this to? Anybody have any idea? Exactly. I'm going to set it to matches. So now if I come over here, I have this value. Let's go ahead and refresh. It should be good. If I add, hopefully this works. I can now add values. Now, if I wanted to, let's say even I wanted to do another button called remove matches. I could do the same thing. Oops. Where I have an on click. That's going to be for a remove matches. We haven't built that yet, but I could say const remove matches. Oops. It's actually just going to do the same thing, but instead of adding 1, we're just going to subtract 1. So somebody broke up, unfortunately. There's a lot of pressure on Valentine's Day. So now if I come here, I've got an add and remove. If I come here, I can take it down or I can take it up. And I'm just manipulating the state of what is currently known here. Okay. I just talked about a lot. How are we feeling? Any thoughts, any worries, any confusions? We're going to be, this is something that we're going to be using moving forward. So if it's a little fuzzy at the beginning, that's okay. I would sort of expect it to be. Using state and knowing how to use state and then knowing how to start manipulating things is going to become second nature to you. It's going to become second nature for sure. Now we're going to talk about now dealing with forms, not now, but tomorrow we'll talk about dealing with forms, talk about use effect. We're going to start dealing more and more with states. Then we're going to connect our database with it. And now we're really going to have a lot of powerful functionality. But you can see even just from a very, very minute side, how even a like button works within Facebook, right? It's got some sort of state that it's holding and we're just manipulating it. And it does some stuff on the background for sure. But this is really the same, right? If I just had a like button and I clicked it and it just went up and down. Somebody asked if I could run through the flow again. Absolutely. So right here, so just let's run through the whole flow one more time. I'm calling my component. I'm passing in some information, passing in 4 different things, right? In my component, I must have props in order to receive that information. I destructure the information, remembering, because I made the boneheaded mistake, so don't make it because I did for you. These must be the same as this key name, or else it's going to say, I don't know what the other key names are. So we're destructuring this. Then what we're doing is we are creating state. By us doing this, this is creating state and telling React, hey, let's go ahead and remember this piece of information. So it creates state. What it does is it creates a getter and a setter. The getter, we've called matches. Again, this could be unicorn, it could be cupcake, could be anything you wanted. But whatever you call this, the one on the right, you always want to put the word set in front of it. That's just the best convention for it. This is just a function, right? Then we are saying these two values equals useState. useState is also a function that takes in an initial value. In this case, we said fairy matches or whatever was passed in right here each time, right? This is creating a piece of state because each time we run fairy, remember this component, all it is a function, right? So every time this function runs, we're creating a new piece of state associated to this instant of fairy. So for that fairies matches, cool. We use useState. We'll set that beginning piece for Greg, our first fairy, it was 20. So we're saying, okay, go ahead and start at 20. So what this function does is it sets this at 20. And then we have this function in case we want to manipulate it, right? So our getter, if we're going to get the value, it's 20. Then we show all the information based off of what we destructured. But when we get to this H2 here, instead of doing fairy matches, we do matches because we want our most up-to-date value for matches. This getter, we want to get our information. And we also have two buttons. These buttons have event listeners of on click. So once they are clicked, I want you to do something. Well, when we want to add matches, when it's clicked, it runs this function right here, which is an anonymous function, which prevents it from being ran automatically. We run this set matches that takes in the original value and then whatever we want to do with it, in this case is adding 1. And then it adds 1 to state. So now matches equals 21. Now, if we were to click this, it does the same thing, but it removes 1, goes back down to 20. Then it exports fairy and puts Greg on this line right here. And then it does the same thing for gray and the same thing for cat. Any other questions on this?
Yeah, there's a question for changing state. Because I know for vanilla JavaScript, it will be ++, so you can use ++. Can you use that for if you're incrementing by 1, obviously, or does it have to be +1 or -1?
Well, let's test it. See, does this break it?
Ooh, does not like that.
Does not like that.
All right, so React, I had a feeling. I really
Yeah.
did. So,
If you guys ever have
yes.
questions, always feel free to test. Testing will be the best thing. But yeah, great question. So it looks like we cannot use ++ or -. It just has to be +1 or -1.
Yeah.
Select them here.
All right.
Great question though.
Mhm.
Any other questions, friends? All this code will be up on GitHub, obviously, and you already have the initial code up on GitHub. I'll change the naming convention. Sorry, it's going to be a little confusing for this first one because it's going to say lecture 1 and then lecture 1 in class. But I'll say like solution and then I'll say, you know, in class or something like that. So I'll change it for next time. Does this make sense? I hope this made sense. Wasn't too confusing.
Ones and zeros in the chat, 0.5s, something to let us know. Just in case, for like the use state, we use it so only like the matches part, it's what Will said, it's a variable and a set matches a function. Only that function can change that variable. Nothing else can. Like you can't alter that. It won't. React doesn't like that. It won't let you. So if anyone tries to do that with a project, you cannot do that. You have to change the variable, that initial state, with the function that is given with the getter and setter. So just in case that comes up for anyone.
Yeah. We're going to look at forms tomorrow, friends. But now you can see we're passing information to and fro. We're manipulating information. So it's starting to get pretty exciting. We're starting to put some pieces together. Think about it. 1 week ago, you guys, well, most of you guys, maybe some of you guys have dabbled, but had never even heard of React. And now you guys are able to, start manipulating it. It doesn't change. It's a single page application. So if this is making sense, then you guys should be very, very proud. And if it's not making sense, but you know more than you did a week ago, that's also very, very good. So be proud of yourselves there. Well, cool. That's all I have. I kept you a minute over, so sorry about that. Try to be exactly on time. But if you guys, I'll stick around for the next couple of minutes. But so if you guys need anything or want to talk about anything, other than that, I hope you guys have a wonderful night. Have a safe Valentine's night. And I will see you guys tomorrow.
Woo.